Being here. Isn't this a great event? I love this event. I think it's great for St. Louis, it's great for Missouri, and it's great for all of our ventures and entrepreneurs that are here to have the opportunity to hear from a few of us who've kind of done this before or been around. And one of the things I think that I love doing this is because it's great for us to meet you guys and feel the energy that entrepreneurs have, and certainly to let you know that all of us are generally resources for you in the expertises that we'll be talking about today. So you've read our bios. I think you have our bios. I'm not going to take too much time going through that and what we do and who we are. But one thing I want to say is that you have that information. Keep in mind, take notes. But I also really want to make this really comfortable and interactive and conversational. So we don't intend to lecture. This is what I do in law school. I stand and lecture for 13 weeks, and the last day of that class, they get an exam, and that's their entire grade for the whole semester. I will not do that with you. I will not lecture and expect you to listen and quiz you later for the 100% of your grade. So my job today is really kind of to moderate and help you ask questions, hear questions, to have them dig a little bit deeper. And I've been asked by the film crew in the back that when you ask questions, for me to repeat it so it gets recorded. We can hear it, but they can't hear it back there. So I'm not being an idiot by repeating questions. I just want to make sure your question gets recorded. So again, very interactive. Jump in, interrupt them. I'm going to be doing it. I don't want to be the only one doing it, so feel free to jump in, interrupt, and ask questions. And so we've kind of talked a little bit, the five of us, on thinking about what kinds of topics that we're most comfortable talking about. And one of the ways we kind of thought about it is, what are the 5, 6 things that they would want to make sure someone like you in a startup venture, or considering a startup venture, or maybe knee deep or hip deep in a startup venture, what you would want to know or should know in terms of what we can do to help you help our community in economic development also. So with that, I'm going to start. Maybe I'll start over here so I don't have to shout until I get to Tom. So I'm going to ask Doug to talk about CPA stuff and what are some of the things that he'd want to make sure you guys know about accounting and accounting adventures. So think about the focus of what we're talking about. The topic that you saw when you walked in is making sure, when I tell our clients at the clinic that they come in and they're bootstrapping and they're cash poor and they say, oh my gosh, I need more money. And I say, why? That we need to increase the value of the company because I need to sell or I need to have investors come in. And so the only answer for increasing the value of the company that they have, most of you probably have, is what? Getting capital, right? Getting more capital, increasing revenue and capital, or decreasing expenses. Well, when you're bootstrapping, you can't decrease expenses much more. And when you're bootstrapping, what you're looking to do by increasing the value of the company is doing it in another way other than raising capital. So that's what we're here to talk to you about, how you can increase the value of the company for merger purposes, for investor purposes, for your pitch deck, whatever it is, whatever stage you're in, how you can increase the value of your company other than by an influx of capital. Doug?
Great. Thank you. Welcome. If I was talking too loud, let me know as well. So we are a full-service CPA firm located here in Clayton and do have 150 people, office in Clayton, St. Charles, and out in California. And to follow up with Geetha, the thing that, to bring to your attention as far as startups and new ventures are some tax credits that are out there for you guys to go after, even if you're not profitable, not sales, you're just in the early stages, but you still can go after tax credits that will bring some cash flow into the business. And there's a few of them that I want to mention. The first one, and probably the most profitable one, or the largest one out there, is what's called the Research and Development Tax Credit. And this is a federal wage-based tax credit. So it's really based off of employees. However, if you use outside contractors for any of your work, you can still get credits for them. You just have to take 65% of the fees you're paying. So basically, if you are developing or improving a product or a process or a technique, you would be eligible for this credit. And so again, most startup companies are in the R&D phase. So pretty much everything you guys are doing would qualify. It's just a matter of how do you determine the, which expenses, which materials might qualify, which people might qualify. Are they in the U.S. or are you using an outside the U.S. company? So all of these things go into the R&D tax credit.
Doug, I don't want to throw you off track, but can I ask you a question? So when you say, somebody's developing or manufacturing or improving something, does it have to be something that's tangible?
It does not. It can be software. It can be an app. It just has to be technological, meaning you can't take something and just make it. It's got to rely on a hard science, engineering, computer science, biology. So as long as you have that, and there's a couple of hurdles to make sure it qualifies. You got to go through a process of experimentation, whether it's testing, modeling, systematic trial and error. And again, it's a wage-based. There's also, Missouri does not have a state credit, but 35 states do have an additional credit that you would get if you're paying taxes. The other thing that makes this beneficial to startup companies today versus a couple years ago is you can now use these credits to offset payroll tax. And that's the biggest thing for startup companies. In the past, it was just an offset of income taxes. Well, now, if you were to file for this credit, let's say here in the next quarter, third quarter of the year, starting with your fourth quarter payroll taxes, you could offset up to $250,000 worth of payroll taxes. So you get instant usage, instant cash flow. And they do carry forward if you can't use them all.
And do payroll taxes include just employees or independent contractors as well?
The independent contractors get used to calculate the credit, but the credits are only used to offset payroll taxes, which I would assume you're not paying payroll taxes. And that's why they take the 65% haircut, because somebody else is paying the taxes.
Is that for entrepreneurials on existing businesses?
It can be for any business. Again, it's as long as you've got a 941 and you're paying payroll taxes or filing an income tax return. You do have to file an income tax return because there is a form 6765 that gets included with the return, and then there's a separate form that goes with the payroll taxes.
Sorry.
But this is new, effective 2016. So in the past, it would not have qualified.
The question was, I'm sorry,
Oh, sorry.
existing or does it apply only to existing or new entities? Yes.
Any website to find this kind of information? You
Any website, is that what you asked?
so we can learn about.
Yeah, I mean, you can go to our website, which is millerprost.com, and I believe the contact, it's MUELLER Prost.com. Or I'll give you my email address and I can email you some information on it. If you just email me, it's dcolker@millerprost.com. So it's all
The
right
name
there.
of all of our firms should be on this, so you can just Google that.
So again, the R&D credit is the most lucrative one out there. There are a couple of other ones just to bring to your attention. One is called the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. This is a credit that you can get for hiring certain types of people, whether they're former military or ex-cons or poverty level, and that so there are certain types of job buckets that can qualify for anywhere from $2,400 up to $9,600. If you meet the criteria. So again, it's money that you don't have any outlay, it's just for hiring people.
And Michael's going to talk a little bit
Yeah.
about other types of credits available in terms of employment. Are there, we talked about the federal tax credit, the R&D credit, and Missouri doesn't have one yet in terms of the similar kind of match in the state credit. Are there local credits that would be available, like what we would think of in the old school days as TIFs that might be available for entrepreneurial entities?
Not TIFs in terms of,
No, go ahead.
okay, not, when you said the word TIFs, being in the city, I have to deal with that. TIFs cannot be given to an individual, it must be given to a developer. So we only give TIFs for development. So they could get a TIF, but it has to be a huge development, $1 million or more, that comes with job, construction, all of that has to be included in a TIF. and you have to go through the TIF committee to get approved, so it has to be economic development.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and there's not, unfortunately, Missouri does not have a whole lot of other state credits. I mean, there are historic tax credits, but it's all geared towards more buildings and commercial developments. And then the last one that will follow up with Myers here is that on your intellectual property, there are, our firm does do valuations. So again, to help protect your IP, to value it, it is worth getting a valuation done, or at least exploring that. And then the other thing too is there are certain ways to structure the IP for tax purposes down the road to help, instead of ordinary income, you could have capital gains income or a capital gains tax to save again on taxes. So those are just things to think of as you start developing IP and either applying for patents or trademarks or things like that. So those would be the 4 or 5 main points that to help entrepreneurs. And again, these are things for you to get cash without having to do really almost more than what you're doing already.
Those are great, thank you. And then follow up with the IP stuff, but also I want to tie the two of you together to talk about the valuation of, maybe not literally, but to get the valuation of IP stuff too. Thank you.
Sure. So thanks. You want me to go?
Yes, please,
All right,
Myers.
sounds good. So if there are valuation questions that come up, Doug we can certainly pass the mic back and forth. So I'm Myers Dill. I'm an attorney at Husch Blackwell. I focus primarily on patent and trademark law. We have 2 offices here in St. Louis. Our main office is in Clayton. Our second office is in the 4240 building, and that office has more of a focus on entrepreneurial ventures. So thanks for having me. As Geeta could likely confirm, covering kind of IP issues and IP strategies in a quick time period is kind of hard to do. It's probably hard to do in 13 weeks. I know 13 weeks didn't prepare me to be an IP attorney. So, really high level wise, before we just jump into intellectual property strategies, when we're talking about intellectual property, generally we're talking about intangible assets, right? Things you can't touch and feel. So there are sort of 4 buckets that most intellectual property assets fall into. Sort of the granddaddy of them all that everybody likes to talk about is patent law. That's where I spend the bulk of my time. We're talking about inventions, apparatuses, methods of manufacturing, that kind of thing, compositions. Second major bucket is trademark law. I would say trademarks, the simplest way to classify trademarks are brands, brand management, slogans. Third, and less used to a certain extent outside of kind of the arts, with one caveat that I'll bring up, is copyright law. Copyrights tend to protect the expression of an idea, so a lot of times, as I mentioned, you'll see that in sort of an artistic type of venue, artwork, music, sculpture, that kind of thing. My one caveat that's a good thing in today's day and age is software. So interestingly, the Copyright Office classifies software code as a literary work. So those of you that are coders will appreciate the value there. The fourth is trade secret law. Trade secret law, with sort of an always evolving and quite frankly confusing status of software copyright or software patent law, trade secrets have become more and more important. For something to qualify as a trade secret, the main thing is it needs to be, 1, a secret, which makes a lot of sense, and 2, it needs to not be able to be reverse engineered. So if you have some kind of secret sauce, we often, advise clients to take the trade secret route. So, the sort of the subject of this panel is how to increase the value of your company. So,
Do we have a question? Do you have a question? I'm sorry. Before you, okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I didn't miss somebody before we went to the next.
yeah, no
okay,
worries.
yes.
So, the question is, how can intellectual property add to the value of my company? Somebody like Doug could tell you specifically how much it adds to your company, but being a patent and trademark lawyer, I also do a lot of due diligence to see how valuable a person's intellectual property portfolio is. So,
Myers, I'm sorry to interrupt you for a second. So I'm sitting here thinking, maybe like some of you are, we at the clinic, we have people at different stages, like all of you are, that come to our clinic. And there are times where I wish, if you'd just come to me 6 months ago, or if you'd come to me before you started writing all this stuff down about the patent and who the inventor was. What do you think is the best time for, now that you've described these 4 areas, when is the best time that you would prefer startups, inventors, trademarkers, graphic artists to come to you?
Sure. So, early is the answer, which
Yes.
Geeta kind of
second that.
implied with the, I wish you would have come 6 months earlier. Dates can be just a huge thing in patent law. We recently, I guess in 2013, became a first to file country as opposed to a first to invent country. So one of kind of my main points I wanted to hit actually is to file early. Your idea doesn't have to be 100%, it may evolve a little bit. And if that happens, it's kind of like I grew up in Illinois, it's like vote early, vote often. It's kind of file early, file often, to the extent that you can
We can
do
laugh about it, we're in Missouri.
Right, yeah.
We just don't vote at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's overrated. Yeah, no budget necessary. Now I'm on the Missouri side, so I can say that. So yeah, I think the answer is early and often. One sort of strategy, if we're going into strategy, especially on the patent side, is one sort of mistake or misunderstanding that a lot of people have is that you need a patent to do what you want to do. That's not the case at all. In fact, a patent has no requirement that you make, use, or sell what you're doing. What it really does is give you the opportunity to exclude others from doing that. It gives you that kind of monopoly power. So one strategy that also kind of adds to the file early and often, and it goes to the often standpoint, is there have been scenarios where I've been looking at a potential target's portfolio for a client when there's going to be some kind of acquisition, and that target has filed what we call defensive patents. So because there's no requirement that you practice the invention that you have a patent for, you can file a patent that essentially covers something that you would see as a likely non-infringing alternative. So even though you're never going to use this, you don't want the competitors to take that route. So you're trying to close as many doors as you can.
So patent is really, this is a goofy thing to say, but you don't need the patent until you need the patent. It's not preventing someone else, it's just putting people on notice that you own it. It's not preventing someone else from actually creating the same thing, they just can't patent it to, and they just have notice that we had first filing in Missouri.
And just one kind of only pushback I would have is that there are people that get a lot of value out of the idea of patent pending from a marketing perspective. So it's sort of funny when you hear somebody say that they have patent pending. I could take rip a page out of this notebook and submit it to the patent office and say I have a patent pending. In some industries where there's less sophisticated competition, that may scare the heck out of the competition, and it's worth it. It only works for a little. It's like a beware of dog sign if you have kind of a 6-pound dog behind the fence. But it is a strategy, and this is IP strategies. So
one of the things I kind of want to point out about patents and trademarks, and I can't emphasize enough how earlier in the stage, the better. And one of the good things that we have, our clinic, for example, participates with the USPTO on 2 different programs. One is the Patent Pro Bono Project. So if you qualify for the Patent Pro Bono Project, you can apply through the USPTO's website, and you'll be directed because you're in this region. We represent this region at WashU Law School. And if you qualify for that, you can get a patentability opinion through my clinic. Our clinic will look through the widget, the idea, or whatever, and tell you and do a research to see what other prior art that might be out there, and we'll give you an opinion that you can take back to the USPTO, and the USPTO will then, if it's likely to be able to be patented, depending on the opinion, it'll go to pro bono lawyers, someone like Myers, who has done a lot of pro bono work through the USPTO's office. And even if you don't qualify for the pro bono project, you can qualify through the USPTO for a USPTO certification project that we're also involved with. And that's a little bit stringent requirement. It's something that has to be relatively unique. They do that first check for us, and then you get some free services from us, and again, also from pro bono attorneys in the community. So if you don't even know if it's patentable or not, it's a good place to start. But the sooner the better.
yeah, completely agree. I've gotten patentability opinions from the law clinic, and they're fantastic. We were talking about it earlier, but I think the best thing you can do is if you're bootstrapping, go somewhere like the legal clinic, and the best thing that can happen is you graduate from it and can pay legal fees. So I think the other thing I just want to make sure I cover is, as far as talking about adding value to your company, I think I'd be remiss not to say that intellectual property is just like real property from the perspective of it can be bought, it can be sold, it can be leased or licensed in the case of intellectual property. You can borrow money using your intellectual property as collateral. And that's kind of outside of that right to exclude and marketing values that we talked about earlier.
So Doug, can we ask you to jump in a little bit and say kind of maybe the 3 most common methods for valuing IP that might you might want to consider while you're looking for investors or working on your pitch deck?
Well, one, that's not my area of specialty, so I don't know all three, but, again, we do have, you would want to make sure, especially following up with Myers on if you're going to use it as collateral or, to look to sell it to get the true value out of it, you would want to get a true valuator, somebody that's got their CVA licenses, who's gotten the training, has the resources, because, valuing IP is hard to do. And if there's not anything else like it, how do you put a value on it? So you definitely want to make sure you've got an expertise. In our firm, we've got a whole department of evaluators that's all they do, both IP, litigation support, all kinds of valuations.
And, there's the key point, I think, is that it is an asset. Even your trademark, even a copyright, even a source code, even, it's all copyrightable, it's all protectable. And if most cases, and most of your cases that have IP, even if it's not patent or patentable, that's most likely to be your biggest asset, right? And how to value that asset, if you haven't gone commercial with it yet, and you're trying to get on a valuation base for your pitch deck, most common way to look at it is looking at it from a cost basis. What did it cost you to get there? Well, that's great, except it's probably going to be pretty cheap valuation. Because if it's costing you to get there versus what you're going to use it for or license it to may be totally different. Another common method is kind of just the income method. Like what would you generate if you did a prototype and had someone use it, actually do a prototype and have someone use it for free and kind of do the beta testing or whatever, and then what would they pay for it? And what kind of income stream could you, future years, kind of based on 2 or 3 years formulation or something. And the final one is basically the most true one. It's kind of the market valuation, I think that, we're talking about up here, but that's hard to do when you're really new and really starting up, when you're out in the market yet, or your widget is slightly different or it's completely unique, that there is no market comparison. So those are typically the most 3 common ways, but variations on a theme that goes with it. Any questions on the IP or valuation before we move on to managing employment structure to raise increase? Yes, go ahead right here. I'm sorry.
I have a question about copyright.
Okay.
She has a question about copyright. You repeated, Myers. I sound like a
She has a
parrot.
question about copyrights. Okay.
I've always heard that if you're creating a written document that you want to copyright, really all you need to do, or that you should always put the copyright mark at the bottom. Is that true, or does it provide you any protection, or?
So you do have some built-in protections by, these are technically copyrighted as is. They're now done. My notes on what I was going to present today. The advantage to registering a copyright, that's the big difference, sending in the application and paying, the government fee, which comes with everything, to the Copyright Office. By doing that, you're entitled to larger statutory damages. That's the only difference. Those numbers can be enormous. So in some cases, it makes sense to do that. In some cases, it doesn't make sense to do that, though, because it will eventually be publishable. So if you're doing something like software, you may not want to show somebody that. So you may just rely on the common law rights that come with, writing your application or writing your whatever your work is.
But I think you're right. Typically, what we tell our clients is, if in doubt, or if you think you're going to and you just haven't gotten to registering it yet, put that Circle C 2017 Keith Assant on it. Because, that's going to it's kind of like the patents. It puts people on warning that the author is not them, that you wrote it and anything that's there is owned by you. And if they write it, they either can't share it, or if they do, they have to credit you. But for the kind of works that we typically talk about with startups, if you have doubt, put that Circle C in there. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Should come back to you. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I have one question about patents. I know if you file a patent in the U.S., it can be somewhat expensive and it can protect you in the U.S., but what if somebody decides to create something in another country, or if you file a patent in another country, will it be enforced like it is here?
So the question is, let's see how I can do with this. So the question is, what rights do you have to enforce against somebody in another country if you have a U.S. patent, and alternatively, how are rights enforced in those other countries? So the latter's country by country. Actually, the former's really country by country too. I mean, there's no such thing as an international patent. You can't have a patent that covers every possible country. There's a patent application you can file that you can then stage off to different kinds of countries. But the long and short answer of your first question, which is sort of a short answer, is nothing. The laws are preventing somebody from making, using, selling, importing into this country. If you have a United States patent, you can't enforce those rights against somebody in, fill in the blank country. If you have a patent in that country, you would lean on the laws of that particular country.
There are a very handful of countries that the U.S. has treaties with to help manage it, but I think Myers is right. Even those treaties are really to help manage the communications and the understanding between the countries. But to enforce a U.S. patent necessarily with a country that we may not have a treaty with is more difficult. Let me come here. He has a hand raised for a while.
My question is more from a patent versus trade secret, right? So when is it, even for a startup company in terms of life science therapeutics, how critical it is to have the patent, and especially probably when you raise capital, and how late can you defer in terms of filing for a patent so that you have a longer shelf life, if I may say that? So the difference, or a suggestion from that, or thoughts?
Sure. So the question is, how long after you have this idea should you file a patent application?
First one, or should I even file it? Can I ever keep it as trade secret?
Right.
And still have the value?
Okay, so the first question is, could you keep this as a trade secret in lieu of a patent application? And the answer is yes. And I think the question really hinges on what you think would be best for your business. Trade secret protection, as long as it stays secret, is indefinite. So if you think what you're doing is something that can't be reverse engineered by somebody else, and they're never going to figure out what that formula is, then it might make sense to do a trade secret. Patents are published. Unless there are some odd circumstances going on. So at some point, people are going to know how to, use, make, or sell what you're doing. And at some point also, namely 20 years from the date that you filed the patent application, it's going to be in the public domain. So it's kind of a business measurement of, do you think somebody's going to figure out what you're doing? I mean, the Coca-Cola recipe is famously under trade secret protection because nobody can figure out how to do it the same. Now, there's marketing stuff going on there too, but yeah.
Right. Let's go back there first, sorry, and then come back down to
I've
you.
got a valuation question, thank you. My question is, how do you deal with the balance of the St. Louis investment community that early on for like seed round companies that they want to put a valuation and have equity, but in life sciences, you're in a situation where you're funded so that the cost model doesn't work. You're funded by grants, you have feature grants that'll fuel the company, capitalize the company, but they want to put some number on it. It doesn't seem like it's even possible, and why not just align that to some type of later round where some smart money comes in and sets that valuation. So there's an imbalance there, at least in this local community. I wonder if you guys can comment on that.
I think that's a really fair point, and I think our community is, now we're leaving the teenage years, and so hopefully as we're heading into college, we're going to realize the valuation at that early stage is really relatively meaningless, right? Unless, especially in the life sciences that you were talking about. But in terms of, this may be a good question for you, Doug, this, in terms of the valuation, we're seeing a lot of requests for that valuation at that early stage where it may or may not make sense, or it's certainly not going to be the real value at the end of the day, which is why we end up going with the cost basis method in doing that valuation. But I think people are getting to know that that is not necessarily a long-term answer, or that's certainly, not even it's barely a short-term answer. It's a Band-Aid. But people really look to want to hear that. You're absolutely right. They want to really understand, well, what do you think it's worth now? What do you think it's going to be worth then? What's the valuation on what am I investing in? At some point, it's got to be a leap of faith, but you're absolutely right. But I think this community is turning around. We're seeing a lot more kind of later stage investment theory and philosophy kind of trickling down a little bit. Thank you. Yes.
I have some concept, but not good amount of data to support because it's being generated. Is it patentable at that stage?
So
Concept.
So the question is a concept alone patentable? The legal threshold is a person, this is going to sound really legally, but that's because it's the legal threshold, is would a person person skilled in the art be enabled to use or make the invention? So, that would be the fundamental question. So I don't know what your particular field would be, but it would be, would somebody be able to pick this up and make, use, or sell this invention? So if it's not to that point yet, probably not patentable. If you want to talk specifics, we probably could do it after, as opposed to what I think is going to be posted on YouTube.
So why don't we move, and we can, we'll all stay behind afterwards, but I want to make sure we get the next two guys in. So if you have questions, please stay afterwards. We'll be here to answer. But let's turn it over to Mike. Mike Holmes, the first.
Right,
There's
Mike Holmes
another
the
Mike
first.
Holmes in town.
The public servant.
Who's going to talk to us a little bit about managing employment structure to create value.
So now you have your patent, you have your investment, you're looking for talent. That's where we come in. We help with you recruiting your talent throughout this region. We do around about 30,000 clients a year. All of our services, I'm not going to say it's free, because you're taxpayers, you have paid for those services, but we don't charge you directly. Your taxes pay for these services. So we see around 30,000 clients a year. Of the 30,000, 19,000 are put in employment a year, and they are from IT, financial services, healthcare, transportation, logistics, hospitality, culinary, you name the sector, that's where people are. So there are benefits in working with your public workforce system. There are 2,100 public workforce systems around the country. So in every major city, there is a public workforce office. Some of the benefits are OJT, where you can apply to get reimbursement for hiring an unemployed individual, an adult that has worked for a while but may have been worked at home and raised their kids, or a father who's raised his kid and now want to go back to work. It could be a veteran who just came out of the military and you want to hire them because they have specific skills, and those reimbursement range from 50% of their salary up to 95% of their salary. That's reimbursed back to the company, not to the individual. And then on some, like a military veteran, they too could get a check from you, a payroll check, but also get a benefit from the Veterans Department, depending on the area that they are getting employed in. Unemployed individuals are one who, right now we're going through a huge layoff in financial services. Let's say if you're in financial services business, you want to hire an individual that's been laid off in financial services or IT. We've done this with BioGenerator when Pfizer went out of business. We helped them rehire 60 people in BioGenerator, individuals throughout the whole BioGenerator industry. We spent almost $1 million reimbursing those companies.
So for hiring 60 people, getting 50% reimbursement, they basically paid for 30 and got 60. And how are these individuals, how do they come to you, and how do you do that placement in terms of who
There
does
are
the
two
selection?
ways. They can come to us directly, or they can come to you. What we found out with Pfizer, individuals had come from Connecticut. They came to St. Louis with Pfizer. Pfizer laid off here. Some of those scientists. Some of those scientists say, you know what, I know how to create the business, but I don't know how to open a business. I don't know how to patent my business. So we help them patent their business, get registered in the state. And I said, think about if you're new in business and you're saying, you know what, I'm not going back, I want this. I want to create my own business. Who are they most likely to hire? They're going to call people that were on their team and say, you know what, I know Johnny, and he's not working, but he used to work for me at Pfizer. Can I bring him in? Yeah, bring him in. If he's unemployed. And what we did there was we said, okay, we're going to give you 50% back of his salary, whatever you pay him. So if it's 110, we're going to give you 50% back to your company.
Does the company have to be registered with you beforehand, or can they do it afterwards?
The company has to be registered with us. They've had to pay taxes if it's new. They've had to have a license to operate in the city or in the state of Missouri. You have to be in business 1 year in the state of Missouri. So when these individuals who were entrepreneurs were coming up. We said, well, they can't be in business a year. They're new. So we went back to the state. State said, well, okay, let's work with them. We could do that. So, and then it's on the federal level. Some of the companies say, well, you know, we've got two companies, different, but I could share that one employee who could work for me from 9 to 12, somebody else from 1 to 5, to make them whole. And the Fed said, Mike, that's a great idea. Do an agreement so your secrets won't be shared, their secrets won't be shared. Let's do an agreement that there's going to be one employer of record, but we're going to pay that employer of record the money.
So, Mike, Doug had a good question here. How are the employers paid? Is it lump sum, or is it how the employees, on the same schedule as the employees, or?
It's how the employees are paid. If you pay them monthly, then we reimburse you monthly. So we'll pick up the timesheets. It is government money, just like anything else. Tax is government money. We got to document that what you paid is what they received. And so, but it's all on timesheet driven, meaning if you pay twice a month, we may say, well, in 6 months, we're going to give you 2 checks. One at 3 months, one at the end of 3 months. Because we don't want to hurt the business by saying, we're going to come every day or every week and pick up a payroll. You may say, that's too much. So we will negotiate per contract, per company. How do you want us to do this?
And how is that treated for the company's tax purposes?
It's a regular tax.
Regular tax?
Yeah, because it's payroll. You're paying, if you say it's 110, you're paying that individual 110. We're going to reimburse you 50 of that 110. And what we're saying is you got to spend it first, so you got to have some cash flow.
But receiving that grant back, so to speak,
Yes.
is not a taxable event?
No.
Separately, right? Any questions for Mike? That sounds like a great deal. Why are we not all taking advantage of that?
What is it really called? At least even if I look up.
It's OJT. That's for I call it regular employment, meaning someone who's an adult, someone who's a dislocated worker. For a military individual, meaning someone that comes out of the war, it's called Show Me Heroes.
And is that throughout Missouri? Every state has
That's
different
throughout
ones?
Missouri. Show Me Heroes is throughout Missouri. OJT is throughout Missouri. And OJT is on-the-job training, meaning you're going to train the person to do some work for you, because wherever they come from, you're going to have to retrain them to do it your way.
So how long can you do support?
Up to 6 months.
And any exclusion? So one of these in life sciences, sorry.
I think someone's going to be in on this. Yeah.
Yes, no, because one of the things in life sciences, we see that there's a lot of internationals that are from Missouri or leaving to other places for lack of opportunities. And can internationals be hired on this startup?
If they've had to work in Missouri or work within some state, we have to verify that they are unemployed, individual, and if they have the right to work in America, then you can use them. If they don't, then no. But for a military veteran, we have to get his, DD 220, whatever that form is. I didn't go to military, but DD 3 to 14. We have to get that form, and they know where that is. We will get that form to make sure that they are a veteran. A lot of people think they are a veteran, but they may not be a veteran by federal standard. So we have to verify that, and if for a small business, you can get up to 90% or 95%. It's by number. How many people work for your company? One, if over 200, it goes down, but if it's less than 100, you can get a bigger tax increase. So,
Mike, I'm going to ask you the same question. Independent contractors count, or?
you cannot be an independent contractor. You must be an employee of the company. We do W-2s. So if you don't do a W-2, you can't use any of our services. For reimbursement, you can use our service for helping you become your HR office and helping you screen your candidates. We'll do that for free, but we can't do a reimbursement on a 1099. It has to be W-2.
And to just follow up, what Mike's talking about is mostly state Missouri stuff. The WOTC credit that I was talking about is a federal credit, so you would be able to get that as well as what Michael's talking about.
What about the part-time
What about the part-time employee?
No, we try to, these programs are to generate full employment. It's to generate full employment for a resident. And that's why when we did it at CIT, they said, well, I don't have a lot of full-time work right now because I'm new. And so we said, well, let's team them up with 2 companies. So if you got 20 hours with you, 20 hours with another company, that's 40 hours. And now you can pay the fringes and the wages for it and make that person a full-time employment. We have to just do those contracts to make sure that employee is getting 32 hours up to 32 or more hours. That's our goal, not just part-time employment.
So I want to squeeze in, I hate to say that, Tom, but will we have time for the whole panel? Let's talk to Tom about the SBA and some benefits of managing funding in a different way other than capital, and then certainly we'll stay for questions for all of us. Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.
Mike.
So I like to paraphrase Ronald Reagan because he always said to keep government out of, private, but I'm from the federal government and we're here to help you. So we actually, our administrator is actually on the president's cabinet, so the Small Business Administration is part of the federal government. And we do provide a number of programs, and because it's funded with taxpayer dollars, those services are provided for free. So we assist with free counseling. I know there were questions earlier about how can I get help. So we have resource partners to provide free counseling, mentoring, helping with business plans, those kind of things for small businesses. That's provided for free. We also provide access to governmental contracting. So if you have something that you're trying to provide to that want to sell product or service, we can help you connect with the federal government. In fact, the mandate is for 23% of the federal government's purchases to come from small businesses, which is over $100 billion per year. $100 billion of goods and services we're trying to find from small businesses. And then the third thing we do is access to capital, which the SBA is mostly known for is the small business loans. If you're in the intellectual property and patents and those things, to get a loan, you're going to have to show cash flow. So to get funding for your business, you're going to be further down the road as far as you're going to have to be able to show ability to repay that loan. You're getting a loan, so you're going to have to be able to show that you can pay that money back. It's difficult to get a loan if you're a startup business. If you've gone to banks or traditional resources, sometimes it's hard. So from the St. Louis District alone, we provided over $225 million in loan guarantees last year. Nationally, it's about $30 billion worth of guarantees. In the St. Louis area, it's about a third of our loan guarantees go to startup businesses. So we're there to kind of help bridge that gap where help you get funding maybe earlier than you would normally without having the SBA guarantee that. We do require if you're doing a business acquisition, we talked about the SBA will require for larger transactions being over $250,000 of intellectual or goodwill type thing to have a business acquisition or business valuation done. That protects, depending upon which side of the transaction you're on, protects you from establishing that value at a realistic value. A lot of times that's done if you're selling a business or if you're buying a business to try to value that business so you have an independent. So the SBA to do a loan guarantee will require you to have an independent business valuation done to make sure you're not overpaying if you're buying a business from that standpoint. In addition to our loan guarantees, we also have a small business investment small business investment companies, which basically allows you to access funding through capital partners. So basically what the SBA will guarantee, so it will allow you to leverage your money. So the money's ran through an investment manager, but the SBA will put $2 in loan dollars for every dollar of capital that's raised. So when you get to the point where you're looking to grow and expand your business and you don't want to raise as much capital as you need or can't raise as much capital or don't want to give up as much equity, the SBA can be a partner with you in that regard and provide, again, 2/3 of the money that you raise can be loan dollars. So when you're thinking about your business and how you can maintain equity, you think about that's a good way to do that is not, obviously, if you don't need to borrow you can borrow money rather than raising capital and do that through the SBA's investment management program that can help you retain some additional capital in your business.
Great, thank you, Tom. I think we're out of time, so I want to thank the panelists on providing such robust information on all these different ways. Thank you, of way to increase capital, increase equity, increase company value without just begging for money and going to the 26th pitch deck routine that we've all done at some places. So thank you for coming. Thanks, Missouri Venture Forum, for putting this on and inviting us. It's a great program for our community and our investors and our entrepreneurs and ventures. Please complete your evaluation that I see some of you already doing, so I hope that's a good thing. But thanks again for coming. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and all of us are going to stick around for a little bit if you have any additional questions. And you should have our contact information in the portfolio that you got as you walked in. So good luck to everyone. Make St. Louis great.
Hold on one second. Big round of applause, and I got a couple of quick housekeeping. Thank you so much.